His laughter at her scars echoed through the maintenance bay. Private Jenkins thought he was being clever, making fun of the quiet lieutenant with the jagged marks on her forearms. She never responded to his jabs, just fixed him with that unsettling stare. Then the 4-star general walked in and everything changed. The room froze as the general called her phantom and returned a salute no lieutenant should ever receive. At that moment, Jenkins realized that the woman he had ridiculed was the legendary spirit of Operation Blackstone. What city in the world are you watching this video from today? If this story of hidden bravery resonates with you, sign up for more stories about the extraordinary people who walk among us. Their greatest battles were hidden behind ordinary uniforms and calm demeanors. The fluorescent lights hummed above us in Hangar 7, casting harsh shadows on the polished concrete floor of Ramstein Air Base. Lieutenant Mayor Ray moved methodically through the maintenance bay, clutching her clipboard tightly as she checked the inventory against the morning's requisition forms. Her sleeves were rolled up in the warmth of the bay, revealing a network of jagged scars that ran like lightning bolts across both forearms, as if frozen to her skin. The maintenance bay was a hive of morning activity. Technicians called out to each other while the distant roar of aircraft engines being tested outside could be heard. The smell of hydraulic fluid and jet fuel permeated everything. A smell Reese hadn't consciously noticed in a long time. She checked off another item on her list. Her handwriting was neat and precise. "Lieutenant, we've logged and stored these hydraulic components," called Master Sergeant Wilkins, a veteran NCO who had been on Ramstein longer than most officers. Ray nodded. "Thank you, Sergeant. Any problems with the delivery?" "No ma'am, everything taken care of." Quote. Wilkins' voice held the easy confidence of a man who had been doing this job for decades. Their exchange was efficient, professional, and to most observers, completely forgettable. But Wilkins held her gaze a moment longer than necessary, and they exchanged a silent agreement before returning to his duties. A small gesture that went unnoticed by anyone except those specifically paying attention. From the other side of the hangar, Private Jenkins watched the exchange with amusement. Fresh out of technical school with top marks, he had arrived at Ramstein 3 weeks ago with a cohort of equally inexperienced airmen. Young men who hung on his every word. His service uniform was still fresh and unworn from the rigors of real combat. His confidence, however, far outweighed his experience. "Look at Lieutenant Piper's haircuts," Jenkins chuckled to his audience, subtly gesturing toward Ray. "What a maintenance worker looks like he lost a fight with barbed wire." His friends laughed at the comment. Their voices were just loud enough to be heard, but not loud enough to be considered insubordination. They were settling into their new position, learning how far they could push their limits without overstepping them. Ray approached her section, her gait calm and purposeful. She didn't look directly at Jenkins or his friends, but something in her posture suggested she had heard every word. "Stand at attention when an officer passes," Staff Sergeant Davis barked from nearby. His voice cut through the chatter. The group straightened half-heartedly. More duty than respect. As Ray passed, Jenkins couldn't help himself. Something about her calm demeanor, her obvious refusal to acknowledge his barbs, made him press on. Quote. "Careful with those maintenance reports, Lieutenant," he called out, just loud enough to be heard. "Looks like they already lost a battle with the paperwork." Quote. The hangar didn't completely fall silent, it never did. But a palpable hush fell among the nearby high-ranking soldiers. Conversations stopped. Tools stopped moving. Glances darted between Jenkins and Ray. Ray paused and turned slowly to Jenkins. Her expression was neither angry nor offended, just calmly assessing. Their eyes met for a long moment. Hers was steady, his was growing increasingly uncomfortable, though he couldn't put into words why. There was something in that gaze, something that made his skin tingle with an unfamiliar tingle. She said nothing, but simply continued her rounds. "Man, what's her problem?" Jenkins muttered, trying to shake off the strange feeling her gaze had left in him. An elderly crew chief nearby spoke without looking up from his work. Maybe you should take it easy, boy. What for? She's just a maintenance guy. I probably got those scars when I fell into a filing cabinet. The crew's chief shook his head but said nothing more. His silence spoke volumes. But Jenkins was too cocky to hear what wasn't being said. All morning, Ray went about her duties with quiet efficiency. She helped a young pilot troubleshoot a diagnostic system. Her instructions were clear and patient. She updated inventory logs, coordinated supplies, and signed off on completed maintenance tasks. She moved around the hangar like a ghost, present but somehow detached from the easy camaraderie that surrounded her. Jenkins watched her regularly, and despite everything, his curiosity grew. He noticed that the senior petty officers treated her differently than other officers. There was none of the grudging respect or the hushed eye-rolling that usually accompanied dealings with lieutenants fresh out of officer training. Instead, they spoke to her in a manner that seemed disproportionate to her rank. They listened as she spoke. Later that morning, the entire staff was called to the command center for their daily briefing. Jenkins sat in the back, surrounded by his usual group of friends. As the room filled, they exchanged quiet jokes, paying more attention to each other than to the officers gathered at the front. Colonel Harrington, the base commander, took his position at the podium. Good morning, everyone. We have a lot to discuss today, so let's get started. The briefing continued with the usual updates on operations, maintenance schedules, and safety protocols. Jenkins felt his attention wander until Colonel Harrington began to discuss a classified component failure on one of the new stealth drones. The thermal signature is unavoidable with the current configuration, Harrington stated confidently, pointing to a technical diagram displayed on the screen behind him. We need to adjust the mission parameters to account for this limitation. From the back of the room, Ray cleared his throat quietly. Sir, if I may. All heads turned. Lieutenant Ray barely spoke during these briefings. Continue, Lieutenant, Harrington said, a hint of impatience in his voice. The signature issue could be mitigated by reversing the intake manifold orientation, Ray suggested, his voice calm and assured. It worked on the earlier prototype. The blueprints in the archives confirmed that it would be compatible with the current model. Harrington paused, then nodded slowly. You're absolutely right, Lieutenant. I had forgotten that solution. Make it happen. Jenkins watched the exchange with growing confusion. Since when did full-bird colonels defer to the lieutenants on technical matters? And how could a maintenance technician have such detailed knowledge of classified drone systems? As the meeting ended and the staff began to file out of the room, Jenkins watched Ray more closely. She quickly gathered her materials, exchanged a few words with a captain from the Secret Service, and headed for the door. Jenkins nudged his friend. I'll be right back, he muttered, then quickened his pace to intercept Ray in the hallway outside. Hey, Lieutenant, he called as he caught up with her. She turned, her expression neutral. Up close, he could see that her scars were deeper than he'd first thought, the kind caused by severe trauma rather than an accidental injury. Private acknowledged them with a small nod. Jenkins walked straight up to Ray, unable to suppress his curiosity. I could show you how to do maintenance sometime, he offered with a condescending smile. It could help prevent future accidents. He reached out to her arm as if to indicate her scars. Rahuria released his hand in a fluid movement that seemed oddly practiced, not defensive but precise, almost instinctive, like someone who had trained for years to avoid invisible threats. I appreciate the offer, Private, she said in a calm voice, but I think I can handle it. A passing veteran pilot noticed the interaction and nodded respectfully at Rise, which seemed oddly nuanced. Lieutenant, the pilot acknowledged in a tone more likely to be used by a superior than by someone 2 ranks below him. Jenkins frowned. Something was wrong. The respect her superiors held for her, her detailed knowledge of classified systems, the way she walked, those scars, all belied everything her rank and position might suggest. "I was just trying to help, ma'am," Jenkins said, regaining his grin. "Looks like they could use some instruction on how to use equipment safely." Something flickered in Raya's eyes. Not anger, something deeper. For a moment, Jenkins felt as if he were being scrutinized and found wanting by a predator. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual serene expression. Quote, "Safety is important," she agreed mildly. "Equally important is knowing the difference between a fight you have to fight and one you're better off avoiding." She held his gaze for a moment before she walked down the hall. Jenkins watched her go, his certainty shaken. The comment hadn't been a threat. It was advice, and somehow that made it all the more unsettling than a direct confrontation would have been. "You're playing with fire, Jenkins." Staff Sergeant Davis's voice came from behind him. Jenkins turned to see the sergeant watching him with an unreadable expression. "Sir, she's just a maintenance officer." Davis shook his head. "There are things you don't understand about this base yet, Privord. People who aren't what they seem." "What does that mean?" "It means they should focus on their work and stop trying to impress their friends by mocking their superiors." Davis' the tone of voice made it clear that the conversation was over. Jenkins returned to his duties, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something important. For the rest of the day, he watched Reyes from a distance, noting how she interacted with others and how she carried herself. Her movements were sparse and her alertness calm, which seemed lacking in a maintenance worker. When her shift was over, Jenkins remained in the hangar and watched as Ray made her final checks for the day. She spoke briefly with Master Sergeant Wilkins. Their conversation was too quiet to overhear. Wilkins nodded several times, and his usually abrupt demeanor was replaced by something that almost seemed deference. As Ray finally headed for the exit, she paused and looked out across the dark airfield, where lights shone along the runway. For a brief moment, her professional mask fell, and Jenkins caught a glimpse of something in her expression. Longing, regret. He couldn't, but it made her seem suddenly more human than she had all day. Then she was gone, disappearing into the gathering darkness outside. She left Jenkins with questions he couldn't articulate and the nagging feeling that he had misjudged something. I see, he didn't understand. 2 days later, the base's command center was abuzz with activity. An unscheduled inspection by Yukon brass had everyone on edge. Officers were barking orders and enlisted personnel were hurriedly preparing themselves. The normally orderly room was in controlled chaos as documents were filed, displays updated, and briefing materials assembled. Jenkins and his crew had been pulled from regular duty to help prepare briefing materials for the command center. They had been working since dawn, setting up chairs, setting up projection equipment, and making sure everything was spotless. It was menial work, far below what Jenkins considered his technical skills. "This is garbage duty. I didn't go to technical training to be a janitor for some big shots," Jenkins grumbled as the folder spread out on the conference table. "Just shut up and get to work," a colleague replied. Jenkins continued to grumble, especially loudly when Lieutenant Ray entered the command center. "Lieutenant Scarface is back," he sneered. A few chuckles, but the reactions were muted. To get attention, Jenkins called out, "Hey, Lieutenant, remember to do your inspection. Don't let any more accidents happen." Race ignored him. Suddenly, the door swung open. "Attention on deck," someone shouted. General Maxwell Thornton entered, flanked by officers. Quote, "Relaxed," he said, "this is not a formal inspection. I just wanted to see how our best base is doing." The atmosphere relaxed but remained professional. When General Ray saw it, he paused. Quote, "My God, Fan, is that you?" The room went dead silent. "The Phantom," a colonel whispered. Everyone started to sprint. Jenkins was confused. Quote, "Good to see you, sir," Ray replied calmly. Then the general was the first to salute. Quote, "A serious breach of protocol. Colonel Ray," he said. Jenkins paled. Stories from basic training came to mind. Quote, "The Phantom Blackstone, a myth in the flesh." "I requested this assignment," Ray said firmly, as the general wondered about her role. He turned to the crew. "You're working with one of the best tactical minds in our military." Jenkins felt sick. Every comment he made lingered on him. "Sir, perhaps we can continue this conversation in private," Ray said. Ever the professional, the general smiled. As she walked toward the office, Jenkins couldn't meet her eyes. Shame burned inside him. The door closed. Whispers broke out. Officers explained who Ray was. The crew chief stepped up to Jenkins. "Some people aren't what they seem." "I didn't know. That was the point." "What do you do now that you know?" Jenkins had no answer. 20 minutes later, the office door opened. General Thornton stepped out, followed by Colonel Harrington and Ray. "Colonel Ray maintains her position," the general said. "To anyone outside this room, she's Lieutenant Ray. Understood?" Quote, "Yes, sir," came the chorus. Then he turned to Ray. Quote, "Perhaps you'll join me on the tour." "Of course, sir." At the exit, he stopped by Jenkins. "Name?" "Private First Class Jenkins, sir." The general looked at Ray. A silent exchange that Jenkins didn't understand. Quote, "Further, Private," Thornton said finally. Jenkins stood at attention until they left the room. Then he said to the wall. Staff Sergeant Davis stepped up to him. Fresh air would do them good. Outside, Jenkins took a deep breath. Quote, "I messed it up, didn't I?" "Spectacular," Davis said, "but there's a lesson to be learned from these scars. They're not from paperwork." "No," Davis replied, "they're from heroic missions under fire, operations we know nothing about." "So why is she here?" "Some run for the limelight, others avoid it. Those who run have usually seen things we can't imagine." Inside, Rayers continued to work calmly, undeterred by the sudden attention. Jenkins could barely concentrate. The scars were no longer blemishes to him, but signs of courage. Davis reappeared beside him. They looked like they had seen a ghost. "I didn't know. That was the point." Davis told him about a mission in Kandahar. Ray had carried out wounded men, badly injured, without complaint. Why was she still working? Her cover had been compromised. She wanted to continue serving, no matter what. Ray was now being treated with respect. Jenkins watched as officers congratulated her. She took it with dignity. "What now?" he asked. "Now we work and remember, appearances can be deceiving." Later, Jenkins ran into Race by chance in the equipment room. "Ma'am, I have to apologize," he stammered. "I had no idea." "You shouldn't have," she said quietly, "but I was disrespectful." "Yes," she said shortly. No anger, just observation. "Hubs tell stories," she said, "but not all are meant to be shared. Less judgment, more observation." As she left, she said, "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how you deal with them." The next day, Jenkins worked quietly and conscientiously. The grin was gone, replaced by a determination to do better. 2 weeks after the general's visit, a new routine settled into the maintenance bay. Ray continued to work quietly and efficiently, still wearing her lieutenant's badge, but was treated with respect that went far beyond her visible rank. Jenkins had changed. He stopped joking, focused on his tasks, and occasionally collaborated with Ray, professionally and without rancor. One evening, Jenkins was working late on a faulty panel when Ray came in. She said nothing, nodded at him, and they worked side by side in silence. After a while, his screen flickered on. "Good work," she said quietly. "These panels may be Turkish." "Thank you, ma'am. Can I ask something?" "Continue. Was Operation Blackstone really that impossible?" Quote, she looked at him for a long moment. "Something is only impossible until someone does it. After that, it's just difficult." Jenkins nodded. He used to think the loudest soldiers were the most impressive. "Now I think it's the ones who do what's necessary without expecting applause." Reese smiled slightly. "They learn." As she left, he said, "Thank you for everything here and out there." She paused, nodded curtly, and disappeared. Master Sergeant Wilkins once said, "Some heroes wear medals, others wear scars." Jenkins understood now. Ray taught technicians quietly, no heroics. No limelight, just competence. As Jenkins walked past the command center one morning, he saw Ray talking to Colonel Harrington. Though her badge was below his rank, they spoke as equals. Jenkins knew he would never learn everything about Operation Blackstone, but he had learned something more important. True strength needs no applause. The next day, a new recruit grinned at Ray and cast a mocking glance at her scars. Jenkins stepped up to him. "I'd be careful, you have no idea who she is. Just a maintenance officer." Jenkins smiled. "Trust me, nothing in this army is just anything." Then he quietly went about his work, a lesson in his heart. True courage needs no audience.